Welcome to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. Doing business and life with a purpose, serving others and achieving success. What a combination. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. We created this show for you because we want everyone to be motivated, inspired, and educated to learn how to do business and live life to make an impact in the world. I want you to think about who you're going to serve today and what impact will you create today. Well, my guest today is a servant heart and one of the most important tools in your toolbox that you need to refine. He's written an incredible book that I've read. I've learned so much that I was sharing in the green with him today. But please take some notes if you have a pad of paper, or if you're just driving or working out. Watch it and read this again or listen to this again, because there's going to be some great tips coming out of this show. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Steve, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Is it Stephen or Steve? I always
Usually go by Steve, but
Steve.
For government purposes, I'm Stephen.
Okay. Well, this is not the government, so we're going to take that out, which is good. I want to jump right in. I said about a tool, and that tool is communication. You can't, we talked about in the green room, you can't be a servant's heart without good communication. Talk about that.
Well, frankly, you can't be good at anything without communication. I don't know whether it's business, personal, everything. Only monks under a vow of silence on the planet Mars do not need to communicate. But for the rest of us, we're going to write, we're going to speak, we're going to send emails, we're going to communicate. And if we can't bring out of our hearts and put into words what we're trying to say, we're going to fail. And so every leader of every stripe needs to learn great, basic, practical communication skills.
When you talk about communication, you're talking about professional, and it's doing business with a servant's heart, but it does spill over to your life with your spouse, your kids, your friends, your people you meet on the street, right?
It absolutely does. I once asked a fellow consultant, I said, who do you know that we were talking about the content of my book, The Point. And I said, who do you know that needs this most? He hesitated for only a millisecond. He said, my wife. She has a tendency to talk around things. And so many of us do. It's not a male-female thing. It's just many people think out loud. They take their time to get to the point without realizing that you're actually losing your audience, whether it's one or many, by not just letting us know the purpose and the intent and where we're going. We don't have time to figure out where you're going.
Yeah. Microwave society. I hear that all the time, and that's what we are. Time is such an ally, and not an ally at times as well. What was the evolution of the book? And it's called The Point, and let's talk about that.
This book is literally 45 years in the making. So I have been wrestling with, how do you teach effectively? How do you preach? How do you write? Both professionally and personally. And in my work, I've done sales, I've done marketing, I've done consulting. Everything depends on a good use of words. And so over decades, I've developed some ideas and perspectives about good communication. And some of that came to a culmination about 6 years ago, in 2018, when I wrote my first book called Clarity Wins. And that was about compressing your message, getting it right quickly into somebody's mind so that they can accurately make a referral. Because we all know that referrals are the best way to get business. But unless we put what I call a memory dart in the mind of our audience, they won't know how to refer us on. So that first book was really focused more on networking and branding and personal branding. But I knew there was something else that was brewing in me about all forms of communication, collaboration, project management, email, all that stuff. And I had this, turns out it was right, felt like a delusional ideal that maybe there could be one formula, one framework for all communication. And during the pandemic, I finally got all those pieces together. And that's what ended up in the book, The Point, which is really a handbook, a practical handbook on how any individual can communicate, a team can communicate, companies can communicate in all forms by just using some very simple rules and tools.
And the point is, and I've told you in the green room too, that's such a great title because that's what you talk about. Make your message quick but simple.
Yes. The four rules that I talk about use the word the point a lot. First rule is you have to actually have a point. So, what is your point? And many times people don't even have a point. So, it's really hard to get to it. The second thing is get to the point. You have to earn attention by very quickly letting people know why they should tune in. The third rule is get the point across, which means I've got to actually get intact the ideas in my head into your head. And we may not have the same meaning, the same definition of words. And so I've got 8 shortcuts of how to illuminate the other person's brain and quickly get that point across so that we have shared understanding. And then the goal of many of our communications is getting on the same page, getting alignment and agreement. And if you look at everything from email to presentations to meetings to books to podcasts, those 4 elements are really what it's all about. You have to have a point, get to the point, get it across, and arrive at the same page. And you can use that template to effectively design any form of communication.
That's simple. Can't be more to the point than that, can you?
That's it.
This is a selfish question, but I think the audience will love to hear too. As I'm reading your book, and how important is when I communicate, especially in person? This won't happen in email, texting, but like in person or on Zoom when people are seeing you. How important is your your passion, your desire to get that message across? We've not talked about, but I'd love to get an answer on that one.
I was having that discussion with my wife a couple days ago, and
Mm,
I have I'm an idea and theory guy, so I see things up in the ether, in the big
mhm.
picture principle. But I told her, a lot of what's going on is people are responding to my passion, not just the ideas, but to the fact that I live these things, I breathe this stuff, and that spreads to people. So part of getting to the point is a little bit more, the exact ideas or words, but what grabs people's minds and hearts and attention is how we feel about these things. And in fact, if people get the impression that we're just blah blahing and we don't mean anything, they'll tune that out.
Yeah, yeah. The noise. Talk about the
Yeah.
noise. That's a one of the best parts of the book when you talk about noise.
Well, I open with one of the most, I think, simple but profound points that every one of us has the same competition, and that's the noise. We're all up against everything, all the email, all the channels, all the screens, all the audio. There are a million things crowding in on everybody's mind, and somehow I've got to break through that with
Yeah.
my message, with my email, with my presentation. So, as communicators, we are up against the noise all the time. And our biggest challenge is beating the noise. It's not this company or that person that's our competition, it's everything that's our competition. We have to secure attention and engagement, and that is the communication challenge.
People shouldn't fear competition, what I'm hearing from you, in a sense.
Well, there are smaller bits and pieces of competition, but if you want to win in the marketplace, the Goliath out there is the noise. And it's not that people are necessarily thinking of you as lesser than this. They're just not thinking of you at all. You're just one voice in a million until you have found a way to rise above it.
Yeah. I think of the Geico Blizzard. You see all those, and I remember it. I mean, it's not in front of me, but it rose above the noise of insurance companies. It's a great analogy, Steve. Pat myself, I don't know why I just did that, but I want to ask this question. This is very interesting. What is resting off Arthur face?
This is something I've started using in my corporate workshops. So I tell people I'm not a natural networker. I'm an introvert. I'm a thinking analytical person. And what can happen with me if I'm not constantly conscious of it, is I can look overly serious because I'm thinking. And so I'll just have this intense face, which people sometimes call a resting bitch face.
Yeah.
So it turns out, though, I have a grandfather on my dad's side. His name is Arthur. My middle name is Arthur. And there is not in existence, I don't believe, a picture or a painting of him with a smile on his face. He's just always very scowly and serious. So I've decided to call my affliction resting Arthur face, because and I even have this old painting of him with scowling, and I have a picture of me scowling next to it just to remind myself, don't do that. Don't be an Arthur.
Wow, you just took what you talk about in the book, imagery, with that moniker, whatever description you want to call that resting Arthur face. Talk about imagery, because now I have imagery in the, because I'm like the other side. I'm always smiling and laughing at people like he's never serious. So I have to come up with monitor myself. But let's talk about imagery in your communication.
Well, imagery is crucial. So just before we went live, you and I were talking, and you were talking about somebody that is a well-known interviewer, and you said he's like the Larry King of sports interview. And for people of a certain age, let's face it, we're of a certain age,
Yeah.
we understand what Larry King is. Maybe nowadays it's Joe Rogan, but that is effectively using an analogy. When you use an analogy, you take an existing memory hook in somebody's mind and you simply hijack it and attach your idea to it. It turns out it's one of the fastest ways to get your point across to people is word pictures, analogies, and illustrations. The human brain loves them and remembers them. You give me a 5-page white paper full of facts, I'm not going to remember. You give me one great analogy, got me.
Yeah. And you just remember it. So that's interesting too. Let's dive deeper into analogies that I just thought of. If I would have said, he's the Tom Smith of interviewing, and you don't know Tom Smith, the analogy is lacking. I don't know the best word to use. So that's important to make sure your analogies fit into your audience.
Yeah, you've got to use, when you're using analogies, you've got to use something common. So if I said, Steve Ramona is the Rolls Royce of podcasters, okay? I have taken something that's high quality, exclusive, desirable, blah, blah. I've taken all those qualities and just hooked you into them and immediately created an impression. And that's the beauty of an analogy. But of course, it does have to be something that people understand. So it can't be some obscure thing, because then it doesn't work.
So in using imagery now, let's take noise. And I go back to it because I think if you learn that, it's a game changer for your communication. So imagery helps if noise was fog and it's noises coming in, imagery kind of pushes the fog away and kind of opens a channel for people to see you. More imagery? I guess I used the imagery again.
Well, I use the imagery of noise and fog to describe the environment we live in. It's like being surrounded by noise. It's like being surrounded by fog, the confusion, the uncertainty, everything's what's going on. So even those two terms are analogies and images that help us more quickly understand why clarity matters. So if I talk about fog, I can use the imagery of the Golden Gate Bridge. And you could have a little couple of pieces just barely above the clouds and say, look, you don't want your message to be like that. And then you take a picture of it on a clear day. You want it to be like that. And that sticks, that communicates.
Yeah, no, that's great. Presentations, I've read that in the book and it's on your LinkedIn, and we're all presenting, whether, again, it's back to your wife presenting a date or you're doing a big presentation for sales or marketing. What are some good, effective tips for communicating during a presentation?
The biggest problem with communication, and the biggest problem, in fact, with everything, presentations, emails, everything, is TMI, too much information. That's the killer of clarity. And we all feel this pressure to try to say 5 things and to try to say too much and to give too many details. And in fact, that is disrespecting the human brain's capacity. We cannot process too much information, so then we shut down. So a presenter has to very skillfully do what I call stratifying, and I explain that in the book. And if you think about a pyramid, with 3 different levels. Stratifying is give me the essence, the distilled essence right away, the top of the pyramid. Tell me where we're going and why this matters. Now you got my attention. Then you can progress to giving me a little more background, a little more outline, a little more context. Then you can progress to more details. That's good communication design. And in fact, it works for everything from emails to presentations to books. Books, in fact, use this design. The title and the subtitle is the essence. Table of contents, outline. The rest of the book is the rest of the book.
Detail.
So this is called what I call being brain friendly, is we need to structure it, pull out the most important things and give it to people in a way that allows the brain to process it naturally. And TMI, dumping the whole haystack, instead of pulling out the needle and saying, here's the needle, TMI is what kills us. We might have something of enormous value, but because we didn't pull out the information and let people see it and clearly up front, we lose the audience.
Yeah. And it's sales and money and income, which we're all about. Referrals across the board. You can't serve. I love that because you're right. Presentations are everywhere in different forms. This is going to be an interesting, weird question, but would you marry me? You say you've never been asked that. And you're married, but let's use that as an example. It's happening every day, but now with COVID gone, it's a regular occurrence across every week. That is a perfect communication tool. Guy's scared to death. I want to marry my girl. Would you marry me? How can somebody communicate that with the imagery?
Well, if you wanted to ask somebody to marry you, but you wanted to be a little more subtle about it, you could do something like this. I'm just making this up. Say, you know what? I love hiking. I would love to take a long hike through the redwoods of the forest above San Francisco, but it wouldn't be right unless you were with me. And unless you were by my side, that's when I would really like it. And you see the reaction, and it's either going to be positive or negative. And then if that's very positive, then you just simply make the transferal of a long hike to a long life. And there you go. So that's one way you could pull it off.
Well, I tell you, I did that, audience, because I wanted to test them. Not that I really was testing them, but that shows you off the cuff, like a comedian can do jokes, like something happens. You just turn something that's a very important part of somebody's life for 2 people. Would you marry me, to something that's comfortable, clear, and probably not people are going to say no if they agree with the hike.
In fact, I really blew asking my wife to marry me. But I hadn't thought about this, but I did use a tool there. We were talking about, she was just finishing her senior year in college. I was already graduated. And we were laughing, and a sense of humor is what really drew us together. And I said something about the effect we have on each other being like a drug. And then I just blurted out. I did not plan this. I just blurted it out. I said, how would you like to become the drug Woodruff? Take on my last name. This was not one of those Instagram ready moments for a proposal. She said yes. And so I asked her to become a drug.
That is such use of words, and fun, because fun needs to be part of words as well.
It was fun. It was pretty bogus when you think about how people do proposals now, but you know what? We've been married for 2 years. We did okay.
I think it's working. Let's just check mark that. It's working.
Yep.
So this is a doing business with a servant's heart. I love talking about servant leaders, but I want to ask this question. A person wants to be a servant leader. What do they need to learn in communication to be that servant leader?
Really, a lot of that is asking questions. So a servant has to be able to listen and understand. And a servant leader is not just someone that's going to come and dump commands on people. That's just, there's time and a place for that, especially if you're in the military or something like that. But being a servant leader means trying to understand and connect with somebody. And the best way to do that is with questions. And the best way to do that is my number one networking tip that I give people who are trying to be great networkers, which is what I call story asking. So we all know what storytelling is, but the opposite side of that is story asking. And a skillful leader, a skillful business person, a skillful anything really, learns to ask good questions and draw people out. And one of my favorite ways of drawing a stranger out that I just met at the coffee shop or whatever is to say, you know, when you graduated from high school and you put this thing in your yearbook, you probably didn't put director of operations for a mid-sized healthcare organization. So tell me how you got from there to here. And I just asked for the origin and evolution story and just keep asking questions. And people just talk and talk because nobody asks them questions. And one of the best ways we can serve people is just show interest in them. I find those stories fascinating. I love it because every single one is unique. It has twists, it has turns. It's like everybody's life is a big tangled mess behind them.
Yeah.
It's this weird thing went, and then this, and I met this person, and I find that fascinating. I love it. And so that's one of the ways in which I build relationships is just by story asking. And people want to tell their stories.
I like the moniker story asking because I'm going to validate audience. What Steve just said is I've been doing that for the last 2 years, and I've had my best year ever last year in networking. I probably added 1,000 people to my network because that's exactly what I did this morning. And I don't like talking about myself, but I'm backing up what you're saying. Had a gentleman on, didn't know each other, kind of figured it out. And I asked some questions, jumped right in, and he had 1, 2, 3, 7 referrals. He goes, "Oh my God." Listen to his story, listen to his problem or pain.
Yep.
We didn't talk about selling anything to each other at all, which is what a servant heart does, servant leader. It will come. I know people out there are, fearing because they're not making money and things like that, but it will come. So I love the clarity of story asking. Listen to that again, audience. That's $1 million tip. That really, really is.
My friend Bob Berg, who's an author of a series of book The Go Givers, he says the number 2 question you want to ask, one is introduction. The second is toward the end of your time with somebody, who can I connect you with? How can I refer you in a way that will be helpful for you? And it's the simplest thing to think about, but people don't ask it. And that's the biggest favor you can do for someone. So once you get to know them, once you get their story and you understand what they do, then, okay, paint a picture in my mind of a good referral for you. And then it's much easier for me to refer because you painted the picture for me because I've asked you to.
Yeah, right. And it's so easy to do that. And you can, because people will go, I don't want to, no, because you're serving them.
Mm-hmm.
If you're giving somebody something, you're helping them. Most people aren't going to say no.
No, I mean,
they're not.
Again, it comes back to referrals.
Yeah.
Referrals are the most powerful engine in the world. And so if we want to be servant leaders, if we want to help people, we refer them. And the way to refer them is to ask enough questions to say, okay, now I see who you are. I see what you do. I see your niche. I get it. Okay, who can I talk to and put you together with? And as you know, there's an enormous joy in making those connections with people. I just absolutely love doing that.
Yeah, and we're in the same freeway that way. And I tell people when I do shows, shut up and listen.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Now people go, well, I'm shut up, I'm listening. I said, no, go on a Zoom call with people like your business or networking group. 2 or 3 people are doing this. If you're watching on YouTube or like this, and then they come back to you and go, yeah, 10 years. I said, no, I asked you, who's your favorite referral? What's 10 years? Because they shut up, but they have to, exactly what you're saying. Listen, I love this show. I would love to have you back for part 2. I know I kind of put you on the spot.
Always happy to talk to you.
This is great. Let's talk real quick because we're out of time. Where can they get the book and how can they connect with you?
So I can be found at stevewoodruff.com. or on LinkedIn, where most of my networking activity takes place. So if you search for Steve Woodruff, or you search for King of Clarity, which is my memory dart shorthand, King of Clarity, you'll find me. And then the book can be obtained on Amazon, both books. So Clarity Wins was published, self-published on Amazon, and The Point is published by Morgan James, hybrid publisher. So both of those are available easily on Amazon. The Point is also on Barnes and Noble and some physical bookstores as well. But Amazon's Amazon. How easy can you make it?
Like them or not, they're easy is the key. It's simple. Boom, 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 it's done. And by the way, you got another sale on Clarity Wins, because after we get done with this show, I am going to buy that book. I'm excited, really excited. So you guys need to jump on the wagon with me, buy the book. Half kidding, but I want to thank you, Steve, for being on. This has been, my book is full of notes and great tips. I want to thank you for that.
Hey, my pleasure. I enjoy talking to somebody of at a similar wavelength about how to work, how to live, how to communicate. And I know from the moment you and I talked a few weeks ago, it was like instant click. Yep. And so, if you want to do a part 2, we've still got plenty of the book we haven't even scratched.
Oh, no. Yeah. We would have probably a part 3 as well, but we'll start with part 2 and work from there.
Yeah.
And audience, I always tell you this is a podcast, and the power of a podcast is listen to it over. There are so many, and I say $1 million tips. I think some can turn into $1 million tips, but get clarity, again, using Steve's word, understanding what his tips are, or reach out to him. He's giving you his email, way to connect, not his email, but way to connect with him if you have questions. And of course, read the book. Don't forget about my TV show, Together We Serve, which is on Fridays, 2 p.m. Pacific and 5 p.m. Eastern. And I want to thank you all for listening. Don't forget about our podcast swag. Get your shirts, hats, hoodies for doing business with a servant's heart will be on the show notes, as well as all Steve's content information to reach out to him. And we'll see you all on the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart.